Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So a few days ago, the trailer for Skeleton Crew came out, and I just have to say, 2024 is truly the year of let's try new things with the Star Wars IP. For better or worse, and honestly, I'm all for it, because it's better than like rehashing the same stories over and over again. So I first heard about this IP maybe like 2 years ago. The story was described as a bunch of kids lost in space being guided around by Jude Law, and my mind went to two things immediately. One, Jude Law is the love robot in AI.
They made us too smart, too quick, and too many. We are suffering for the mistakes they made because when the end comes, all that will be left is us. That's why they hate us.
They ask for me by name, Gigolo Joe. What do you know?
And two, I thought Stranger Things, another show that was supposedly made for kids, but let's be honest, was fueled by 1980s nostalgia. People always talk about how Stranger Things is nostalgic for the millennial crowd, but it's actually more of a Generation X thing, now that I think about it, because although some of us millennials were born in the 80s, we're more 90s kids. But yeah, we grew up with a lot of 80s influence, though, even in the 90s. And so when I heard the creators of the show talking about how this was Star Wars but Goonies, I actually wasn't surprised at all, because that's kind of what Stranger Things was really based on as well. The Goonies was a truly fun and exciting adventure film, a coming-of-age experience that also had its scary moments. The Truffle Shuffle and Sloth, who actually isn't a product of inbreeding, but the result of his mother dropping him too much on his head when he was a baby. They just made up a lot of things in the 80s. That's how things were like before the internet became popular. Plus, there was a lot of cocaine in the drinking supplies. So the term skeleton crew refers to a minimal crew for any kind of machinery or vessel. In this case, I'm guessing it's this U-wing looking kind of ship. Space travel plus kids equals an adventure that many of us have dreamed of. It's as good of a premise as you can think of when it comes to a Star Wars adventure. I mean, every great Star Wars film has a great ship that serves as the hub, and it's almost like a character itself. It's definitely a better vehicle than the Caravan of Courage. And so, if they can pull this off, this show should be entertaining to not just kids, but to adults. Actually, now that I think about it, it has to be entertaining to a wider range of audience than just children. And if you take a look at the release time, which is around the holidays, it kind of has to. You know, this is supposed to be something the whole family watches together. Now, the most important thing when assessing shows like this is who's the main creating force behind it, and in this case, it's Jon Watts and Christopher Ford. Who are these guys and what are they about? Well, they're a director and writing duo. Watts directs and Ford writes. Christopher Ford wrote the screenplay for Spider-Man Homecoming, and Watts directed all three of the new Spidey films, including Far From Home and No Way Home.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Christopher Ford also wrote the screenplay for Robot and Frank about a decade ago. This is a story where an old dementia patient is given a caretaker robot. Although reluctant to accept such help at first, Frank realizes that this robot is the perfect partner for a series of crimes he wants to commit against a greedy local real estate developer. It's actually a really heartwarming little indie film. I enjoyed it. There's also like kind of a dark side to these two individuals. One of the first collabs that Christopher Ford and Jon Watts did together was a film called Clown, which is a story of a normal family man, a father, a husband, putting on a clown costume, which then literally fuses to his body because it's the skin of an Icelandic demon. The other film they made together was Cop Car, and this is a story of two kids who accidentally come across a empty cop car and then just go on a joyride, not knowing that this car belonged to a very corrupt cop who had a tied-up body in the trunk. So yeah, these guys are kind of twisted. Kind of like how Key and Peele's Jordan Peele always wanted to do horror, and how the Duffer Brothers, who created Stranger Things, also originally were interested in making post-apocalyptic horror films. And so I actually take this as a good sign. Their love of indie horror films balances out their more career-driven choice to make the Spider-Man films, which were decent, but I think ultimately forgettable unless you're a huge Spider-Man fan or if you really like, member berries in No Way Home. My favorite thing, honestly, in all three of those films was Jake Gyllenhaal being an evil bastard in the middle and arguably weakest entry of the trilogy.
See, that wasn't so hard.
Somebody get this stupid costume off me!
But then again, guys, I'm not a huge Spider-Man fan anyway, so, take my opinion with a grain of salt. I actually liked Enter the Spider-Verse more than anything, just because it was so visually creative. I've also been tuned out of Marvel ever since Endgame. I just really don't care about the story too much anymore. If you follow my Star Wars coverage, you also can tell that I don't really like superheroes in general. I don't like the Jedi and Sith. I'm more into the everyman and every woman stuff. Now, whether Watts and Ford are actually up to the job of making a Star Wars film, I really don't know. I hope Disney didn't just choose these guys because they were comfortable with working with them in a previous endeavor. The real problem with Disney is that they're just a traditional Hollywood-style studio. They're just too much of a legacy company. They're too large, there's too much bureaucracy, internal politics, there's too many grubby hands on all of their projects. I mean, if you take a look at HBO, which really has been built for streaming since the cable days, it has a culture of minimal interference when it comes to creativity and excellence of the finished project. Which is why they've been killing it recently with their TV series, which always come way under budget than Disney and Netflix series. Like, they just are super efficient with what they do. And I wish Disney and Netflix would look more at HBO and how they do things. If only HBO's parent company, Warner Brothers, wasn't in such financial distress. This is just the difference between a purpose-built movie-making machine versus a massive 100-year-old company that also runs theme parks and controls all of our childhood memories. Actually, now that I think about it, HBO making Star Wars films would be amazing. I feel like they would actually know how to do this. Disney needs to chill and give Lucasfilm more freedom, and Lucasfilm really needs to chill and give the individual creators more freedom. It's not like their overbearing control of all of these TV shows and movies have actually worked out. I don't think Star Wars fans have hated the franchise more than they have now. And so, does it really hurt giving a creator like complete control of their project? I don't think so at this point. And if you look at the most successful TV shows in the Lucasfilm-Disney merger era, these have been shows like Andor and The Mandalorian. And what made these shows excellent was that in both cases, Jon Favreau and Tony Gilroy, the creators of these shows, were strong enough of a presence to really make these shows their own. Andor was truly an auteur piece full of terrific world building and character studies. It delved deeper into the themes of rebellion and political ramification of such movements, better than George Lucas ever could. I actually have no idea how they made Andor in the first place. It seems like the exact opposite thing that Disney would greenlight. They'd probably be like, we need more lightsabers, more Jedi, and starfighters. And, these things I do enjoy, but, I love the fact that they finally took the Star Wars setting seriously. And we got a, very political, character-driven, kind of narrative-driven story that was extremely relatable to just the average person. It wasn't just a fantastical world. It was real people doing real things and suffering real consequences. So, yeah, I want to see more of that kind of stuff. And then you had The Mandalorian, which was actually more classic Star Wars. It was nonstop fun and over-the-top moments. And it was reminiscent of early Iron Man films. And the reason it was done so well was because Jon Favreau, again, is a master of doing this. Now, I don't think John Watts and Christopher Ford are at the level of Tony Gilroy or Jon Favreau, but they are younger. They have a much shorter career, so anything is possible. They could deliver with skeleton crew. But the problem, again, with Lucasfilm is they always hire these very young creative teams. I don't know why they do this. Maybe it's to save money, or maybe it's just so that they can kind of be more domineering over them, control everything they do. I always talk about how Ridley Scott would be a perfect fit for Star Wars, but Disney and Lucasfilm would never just allow him to do whatever he wants, so he would never work with them. Now, if you watch this channel, I'm not a huge fan of dictators, but when it comes to movie sets or any kind of creative project, you have to be a dictator. The artistic vision cannot be compromised because of money people and other asshats who like to get their grubby paws in on these projects. I don't care, how much money is being invested into these projects by, crazy rich people. At the end of the day, the artistic vision cannot be compromised. And you really cannot judge your work or art until it is finished. And so, having these guys walk in during the middle of a production and telling people what to do is just ridiculous. If you take a look at the earlier history of Disney acquiring Star Wars, there are a lot of moments where younger creators were just overwhelmed by the scale of these projects and the pressure coming from corporate. Gareth Edwards had a huge problem with Rogue One. Dave Filoni also lacks, I feel like, the experience to really direct films himself. Then there was also the situation of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller getting booted from Solo before they even finished the film, and this is because they weren't willing to compromise with Lucasfilm. And then there was the Colin Trevor drama with Rise of Skywalker, where they fired him and they brought J.J. Abrams in, and Rise of Skywalker was just terrible. It was definitely the worst of the sequel trilogy. You could tell they didn't plan anything, and they just kind of pieced things together. Look, I'm not on the inside of these discussions, so I don't really know exactly what's going on, but I really don't think it's a good idea to stop a production while they're still filming and then bring in a different, creative team. It just makes no sense. It shows us that there was a lot of chaos going on, a lot of political games going on in the studio here. Now, John Watts and Christopher Ford have been given $136 million for 8 episodes. That's $17 million for each episode. And judging by the trailer so far, I have to say it does intrigue me. I mean, the suburban utopia look for the neighborhood that these kids live in is clearly designed to relate to the audience. I almost feel like the story starts off on Earth with a bunch of kids traveling to the Star Wars galaxy. I've also read that the creators of the show are inspired by Amblin Entertainment, which is basically everyone's childhood, the non-Disney part. They made the Goonies, they made E.T., Back to the Future, Jurassic Park. And so the suburban neighborhood really fits into the Amblin Entertainment vibe, maybe mixed with a little bit of Tomorrowland and New Republic aesthetic. But for this film to really work, you're going to need some excellent art design and visuals. This is an adventure film, so the locations are going to be important characters in the story that really drive the plot forward. This should be something that Disney, with their massive budgets and experience, this should be something that Disney can figure out pretty well because they have, huge design teams. They have a lot of artists working with them. This is kind of their specialty. But then again, it's been hit or miss recently when it comes to visuals. The fact that they will be using stagecraft volume technology again is a bit worrying, as the cost-saving measure tends to give very flat lighting to the scenes. Although when used sparingly in more dialogue-focused scenes, it is okay. There will also be a lot of large matte paintings that will be used for backgrounds instead of CGI or on-set locations. Take a look at the large crowd scenes in the original trilogy and some of the other more fantastic renderings, like the inside of the Death Star. These are painted backgrounds and not CGI. Then you have the legendary ILM alum Phil Tippett coming back to lead a stop-motion team, which means that this series is going to try to really lean into that nostalgic look of the classic Star Wars films. As far as the cast goes, I don't really know any of these kid actors, but I do know that Jude Law is going to kill it. He generally does in everything he's in. I wonder what side of him we'll see this time around. I have a feeling that he will be a darker character, maybe a scoundrel with a golden heart, a person who puts on an impressive face for the outside world to see, but internally is actually quite sensitive. And if we take a look at the individual episode directors, the only name that really pops out for me are the Daniels. That's Daniel Kwan and Daniel Snyder. They made that very wild and fun film, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So yeah, it's always interesting to see Star Wars try and do something a bit different. I really like the idea of Star Wars plus Goonies or Stranger Things. But yeah, let's wait for more news to come out about the show before we make more judgments of how this thing will play out. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think, and also don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic.
To democracy!